This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, MICHAEL COVEL. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. My guest today is Jason Calacanis. He is a venture capitalist, entrepreneur, angel investor, author, blogger. He's had some perspective going back quite a long time when it comes to investing in startups. First thing, out of the gate, his book, Angel, check it out. Even if you say to yourself, Michael, I don't plan on being an angel investor, read this book. Read this book so you understand how our modern economy unfolds. Jason gives great insights. Also, as a quick reminder to those of you that have not yet had a chance to see my newest edition of Trend Following out right now in 2017. Now, you might be saying to yourself, Covell, I've already read your book. Give me a break. This thing is basically an entirely new book. Yes, I kept the same title. Who would not keep the same title of Trend Following? It's a great title. I own the brand. Of course, I'm going to stick with it. But I painstakingly updated, expanded, augmented, changed, added to this book in a massive way. And I'm super proud about the audiobook version, which is out now, and the physical hardcover version. The physical hardcover version is one of those books that you put on your shelf and you don't get rid of. Let's face it, we all know today people get rid of books because they're garbage. They're absolute trash. They look terrible. They don't hold up. This newest edition of Trend Following is a beauty for the shelf. But enough talking about me. Let's jump in with Jason. And I want you to also keep in mind, angel investing. This is about casting your net wide because you can't predict which one is going to be the winner. You never know where the grand slam is going to come from. The similarities between Jason and trend following traders of my world, well, it goes without saying. There is a massive, massive correlation in thinking. Hey, but enough of me rambling away. Let's jump right in. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Jason Calacanis. So Jason, I love the beginning of your book. I love it. You know, you go down this path where I expect to pick this up and learn everything there is to know about angel investing, which you can definitely get from that, what you can get it from your work. Absolutely, 100%. But the beginning, you know, right there on the first page when you say, hey, this is not one of these bullshit self-help books. But you quickly say, hey, look, the American dream is right there for all of us. But you say, you know what, for most people, they're probably not going to get there. And what you really slam, which I've not seen a lot of people openly do, and I'm sure you're a nice guy that will explain why you slam so hard, but you slam the menial behind the counter jobs and you kind of go after, you know, some of the coffee places. And if you think about it, if you look at Starbucks, I mean, we all like going in Starbucks and stuff, but you know, these menial jobs behind the counter, they've even given these jobs that are not the greatest jobs. They've given it this fancy, fun name, barista. I mean, you know, lay out the case for people right now, because you're brutally honest in the opening of your newest book.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I obviously there are two different things we're talking about here. We're talking about the jobs themselves and what they entail, and then the people and people needing jobs and the people who have those jobs have all the love in the world for humans. Now, certain types of jobs are just brutal and hard, and it would be better if human beings didn't have to suffer through them. I think we can all agree on that. And so when it comes to, you know, having to sit there for 8 hours in a token booth while people go across a bridge and collect $3, like, you know, used to be token booth clerk, would be a career in the subway or outside with all the cars lined up at the foot of a bridge. I don't know that we want our kids or anybody doing the jobs get the job and they're able to pay for food for their kids. Sure, I get it. We all need to have a job and to get by in this world. But I think those kind of jobs, we're all pretty happy to see those jobs go away with Easy Pass. And it's just great to just zip through with those little boxes, and pay our tolls over the bridge. I talk about in the book how, there's 30 million jobs that are going to go away here in America. Those are the retail and the driving jobs, whether it's truck drivers or people working the register at McDonald's. By and large, those jobs, 60, 70, 80% of those 30 million jobs are going to be gone in our lifetime. And it could be something that happens faster than people think of. Technology moves at an exponential clip, generally speaking, sometimes even faster. The time between when nobody has a mobile phone and the time between when everybody has a mobile phone, it seems to be accelerating, right? I think what we're going to see is a massive acceleration in technology to replace those kind of jobs. And when we do, we're going to have society get ready for that. That's why people who previously were probably for less government are suddenly for universal basic income, which is basically like the ultimate form of government. Like, we're going to give everybody money for free that comes from, taxing the ultra wealthy. I think the world is going to get flipped on its head a couple of times, and the book tries to address that. And one of the opportunities in the world getting flipped on its head a couple of times is that new companies are going to be made, and you can either be part of the creation of new companies, new products and services, or you don't have to be part of it. What I think is people should be part of it, and I wrote the book as a way for people to get an idea of how to break into angel investing. It doesn't make it certain that people are going to succeed, so I tried to be candid about that. But if you put in 5, 10, 15 years doing this, I think that it could be life-changing.
Let me keep you at this beginning part of the book for a while, because I think it's really important. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, so it's not just toll booth people. I mean, there's a lot of jobs in America that are either even white collar and desk jobs and high paying that really could be automated, that really don't need to be there. And I think one of the struggles that we have right now is that if people in your world, if Silicon Valley had their way, we would probably get to this place where a lot of the jobs that really shouldn't be there would be eliminated. And just so I don't sound like a complete Grinch or I'm being a jerk or something like that, but there's a bright side on the other side. If we can all get ourselves going with this type of thinking, the opportunities are unlimited.
If you look at the technology that's being created and the pace at which it's being created, either it's going to get created here or it's going to get created in China or India or Europe. The technology can't be stopped. The idea that it's Silicon Valley versus the world or versus the blue-collar Rust Belt jobs is not exactly a correct narrative. It's kind of technology is going to march on. People are going to use technology to create companies. We all just have to kind of admit that that's table stakes. That's just the way the world works and the way it's always worked. People are going to find interesting technologies and be innovative. We're innovative. We're an innovative little species, us humans. We're clever. We figure things out. We build tools. It's not going to stop. And the idea that we would somehow stop it or try to contain it is probably not in the long-term best interest of humans on planet Earth. If you think about things like clean water, energy, food. We were sitting here 50 years ago, and the general thinking was that we would be dealing with massive famine and we wouldn't be able to solve it. Then we had a moment where we thought, my God, oil is going to become $300 a barrel, and there is going to be no way for us to power the Earth. The Earth is going to collapse because civilizations are going to have the power grid burn out, and we're going to run out of oil. We're going to hit peak oil. These things turned out to be false because of technology. We live in a world where energy, water, and food are, I wouldn't say free, but most people don't know what they paid for water last year in the United States. Most people don't know what their water bill is. Most people don't know what their electrical bill is. Most people are not even thinking about water and electricity anymore. That's because of technology and the massive advances we've made over time in technology. And we're going to see that continue. When you look at the average car today and how safe it is and the technology in it, the cheapest car you could buy today is a magnitude more sophisticated than the most expensive one you could buy in the 80s. In just 20, 30 years, the cheapest product you can buy in the market outpaces what was the most expensive in terms of safety and technology. The idea that you would pay for power windows or airbags or anti-lock brakes, these things just became so cheap that the world gets better. The world is getting better, and that's the opportunity. We're going to have food costs, I think, plummet because it's going to become so easy to grow food because of robotics, artificial intelligence, big data, giving us easier and easier access to more and more food. There's going to be a small subset of problems. That'll be hard, of course. But this idea that we're going to have less jobs, but perhaps more bounty and people will live longer and people will live healthier lives is completely possible. But we have to manage that transition. And it's going to be difficult to manage in an ideological world where people get painted into a box. Are you for more government or are you for less government? Oh, you're for more government? You're a socialist. You're a communist. Oh, you're for less government? Okay, you're a crazy right-winger. You're a libertarian. You want everybody in their cars with guns and no seatbelts driving 100 miles an hour and whatever. We really need to grow up and be able to take this middle centrist road and say, what exactly is happening here and what is in the best interest of society and what experts can we tap to try to solve these massive problems? Because this infighting we have now is not going to get it done.
Well, the infighting is just almost like some kind of modern day Roman, Colosseum type thing. We all just sit around and watch and we all pick a side and we all debate it. But then, everyone goes to sleep. They wake up, they do what they have to do to make their money. And that's the most important thing. Not necessarily the most important thing, but you still have to get by. And I think you're right. There is a tremendous amount of time being put at this kind of extracurricular political activity. And it's all nonsense, really, at the end of the day.
We're going to look pretty silly if we fight like this for the next 20 years. And then sea levels rise, 3 feet or something, and some cataclysmic thing happens to the environment. And people say, wow, what did our parents do before all the cities got flooded and Manhattan was underwater? What were they doing when they should have been studying and resolving this issue? And they were fighting over, this President Donald Trump or this issue or that issue. Like that really was a complete distraction from very pressing issues that society has.
Speaking of, you were mentioning this transition, and there's kind of a starting point, a ground zero for this transition. And you describe it in geographic terms, and I'm sure, obviously, a lot of people will agree with you. And that is the Bay Area, Silicon Valley. Try and give, for everyone that's listening, a really broad, and you can go as deep as you'd like as well, too, picture of Silicon Valley. I've been there a couple times. I don't know if my being there really amounted to much, but I have a feel for the geography, a feel for San Francisco. It's one of those places, it's not really a destination. It's becoming one now, but you kind of, for most Americans, you have to kind of say, I'm going to go there. But it really is, as you paint it as the center of the world. Why don't you elaborate on that?
Yeah, if you just look at what's happening here, I think the most ambitious people in the world, or a large percentage of them, are coming here, and the capital here is flowing very efficiently in very large numbers to back very audacious ideas. In fact, most people who come here with a business idea get turned down by investors, and I think the number one reason is that's too small of a business. That's too small of an idea. Come back when you have something that can become $100 billion company. Come back when you have something that can make $10 billion a year in revenue and double every year. That's the kind of thing Silicon Valley is looking for. So the sense of optimism, the willingness to take risk, and the willingness to believe in the power of, a single founder or a couple of founders who want to change the world is unlike anything I've seen in my life. I grew up in New York. I spent 30 years there and 10 years in Los Angeles and 3 years here. I obviously have been coming here for a long time on a regular basis. Living here is a little different. Living here is, I think it's a quirky place. It's weird. It's like San Francisco still has its roots in the hippie era. In some ways, the city is run poorly compared to other cities. It's highly politicized, super liberal in a way that sometimes, people might not be able to comprehend.
You mean the naked guys walking down the street?
I mean, if you lived in any other city and a person walked down the street naked, you would call 911. You'd be like, "Wow, this is crazy." And then here, if people are walking down the street, or there's a festival called the Folsom Street Fair, or Folsom Festival. Anyway, if you're a bashful person, don't Google that and click on image search, because it's literally people having sex in the middle of the street. So, or any other kinds of crazy stuff going on. So it's definitely a unique place in all the world. I think part of that, really liberal attitude is what makes people, attracts these risk-taking people who want to change the world. It's got a little bit to do with the summer of love and psychedelics, I'm sure. It's a pretty groovy place. It's got its own subset of issues that need to be worked on, just like any other vertical industry. But the world is bending to what Silicon Valley thinks its vision is. And I'm not saying I am Silicon Valley. I'm a small bit player in the whole scheme of things. But I do think the center of gravity for the planet Earth is here. When you think about Twitter and how that's been used in revolutions, or Facebook and how that's changing political elections and how people relate to each other. Google obviously is doing some crazy things. SpaceX and Tesla obviously changing the world. Like, these are heady companies that are really making their stamp in a global way. And that's one of the things that changed in just the last 10 years, since Google brought their products around the world and essentially won every market except for Russia, Korea, Japan, and China. They basically won every other market but those four, in terms of search and being the major player there. After they printed that blueprint, Airbnb, Uber, Facebook, WhatsApp, Twitter just followed that playbook of going global. So not only are the ideas incredibly clever, not only are people willing to invest tons of money into them, they quickly become global phenomenons. And it's very rare to see another country create a company that then has a global footprint. It's very rare. And if you look at countries around the world and just ask yourself, like, what company's been created in the last 10 years that 1 billion people are using, if you ask, or 100 million people are using. If you ask that about Silicon Valley, you can just start rattling the names off the top of your head. Instagram, Twitter, WhatsApp, Uber, Airbnb. There's just tons of companies that are engaging on that scale. And then you look at other countries, it's like, okay, you got Spotify, okay, what else? Okay, Baidu, yeah. But that's not a global phenomenon. It's a domestic one. Okay. Alibaba, that's domestic. Okay. You start looking at who's able to export their ideas and services around the world. That's America. And that's really what's special, is people here have massive global aspirations.
Whenever you pick up a book, you're living vicariously through someone else's experience, someone else's expertise. And I want to stay at the geography point for a moment, because you're seeing the center of the world. I mean, it's like, the folks in Seattle. Look, there's a lot of tech in Seattle. You got Boston, you got New York City. But you're giving this insight that it's really Silicon Valley, no matter what. This is it. How do other folks take that statement, or behind the scenes, do you find that most VC folks are going to agree with you?
Yeah, I mean, it's just objectively a fact in the technology industry that this is the center of gravity. So then intelligent people could debate who's got the most power and influence over the planet right now. Is it Moscow, New York? It's certainly not Washington, D.C. at this point. And, listen, I'm from New York. I think it's the greatest city in the world, certainly the greatest city in America. But it's really not a popularity contest. It's just a fact. The number of companies that are being built that are worth over $1 billion or $10 billion or over $50 billion, the largest number of them come from here. That's pretty much the most objective measure you could have. Sure, Amazon and Microsoft come from Seattle, and Snapchat comes from LA. And in New York, we've got, Etsy and Kickstarter and Tumblr and a couple of other groovy companies. But this is the area where the largest companies that do the most commerce on a global basis come from. On influence, we could debate that too. Some people might think art has some large amount of power over the world, or finance, and London and New York have some footprint in finance. But I don't think the finance people are driving what's happening in the world right now. I think it's the technology people. I don't think it's the artists necessarily. Music industry seems to be completely vapid. The movie business is completely vapid at making 50 superhero and horror films a year.
It's terrible, right? It's just so bad. And you pray for a good movie, right?
Who's actually doing something that's changing humanity, like just literally changing humanity? It's here, and I think some people take it the wrong way when I say that. It's not saying things can't happen in other places. Of course, things do happen in other places. We're sitting here with Snapchat being worth $15 billion just down the block, in LA, and you have plenty of other companies all over the world that are worth billions of dollars or tens of billions of dollars. Obviously, China's got its own cohort of winners: Tencent, Alibaba, Baidu, etc. So there's a lot of cool, groovy stuff going on over there that is at scale, but it's not leaving China. There's no Chinese service that we use every day here in America. I mean, you have Samsung, which is a Korean company. We do have a lot of people in America using that. It's a pretty global company, but Silicon Valley has run the table on the globe. It really is just changing to bend the world to its vision. And I'm not taking credit for any of that. I kind of feel like I'm an outsider here, to be honest. I feel like I'm just documenting it. It's just so obvious to me looking at it that this is the place that is driving what's happening in the world.
Before we jump into your super cool Uber story, now I'm starting to speak like you. Now I'm right in San Francisco. You're using groovy. Now I'm using cool. Stay in China for a moment. I'm calling you from Saigon, Vietnam today. And the one thing that's so frustrating when you go to China, and I've been many times to mainland, is that all the things that we want to use in almost every other country around the world that we can freely use, you almost can't use in mainland China today. I'm not necessarily saying that as a criticism of China. I kind of get why they're doing it. They're kind of like, hey, you know what? Why should we allow Mark Zuckerberg to come in and own the social media of 1.4 billion people? We're going to let Chinese entrepreneurs take that business with their own social media, Facebook type service. Speak to China, though, for a moment and how you might envision it unfolding in the future. Do you see that great firewall staying up for the foreseeable future?
That's a good question. I think probably the West has had a view that China is going to just change any day now, and it doesn't. The arc of history is pretty long, and it hasn't changed all that much. I mean, people are working in factories instead of farms, but you still can't read or say or do whatever you want in that country. It is the tipping point. I mean, if that was a democracy, boy, would it be an incredibly influential company. But the kind of protectionism you're talking about and closed borders, subjugating people and not letting them speak their mind and read what they want and do what they want, that's going to put a cap, I think, on their ability to influence the world.
So far, though, they've done great. I mean, since 1979, they've brought more people out of poverty than just about anywhere. You go there, you feel the wealth, you feel the confidence, but that the wall, the quote internet wall, is just odd every time I go.
We'll see. I mean, I think the story's yet to finish here.
Sure.
So that also, I mean, a lot of people feel that the currency and the economy there, nobody really has any control over it or insight into. I mean, it's highly regulated and manipulated, but does anybody really have the ability to control it? What kind of perverse collapse might we see if people were doing all kinds of fugazi stuff? When you talk about a contagion and something going wrong in China, I mean, that would have a massive global impact. And I think people worry about that. They worry about people cooking the books over there, and there's a place where people value, they're just starting to evolve their own versions of regulations and guidance on how to run companies. And, I could never see myself investing over there because I have no idea how it works. There's no transparency. It feels like a black box, and it is a black box. I mean, so I think for American companies, Google kind of has the right approach, is just route around it, and it's going to be its own thing. And obviously we need them for their factories for now, and they need us to make our iPhones, and hopefully it's a peaceful coexistence. But you have had a number of people protesting over there, and You give people a little bit of democracy, they're gonna keep taking more. People have a little bit of a taste of the freedom over there. They have a taste of the good life. They get themselves a VPN, and all of a sudden they're seeing what's going on here in the West and watching Western TV shows. Things could tip over. It's going to be an interesting 20 years. I'm no expert on it.
I mean, on the positive side, I got to tell you, every time I'm in mainland China, I mean, I feel the enthusiasm. I feel the desire to be a capitalist. I feel the desire to make money. I mean, the people really seem engaged. It's an interesting conundrum, that's for sure. Hey, let's go to the really cool. I mean, there's a lot of probably cool stories in your life, but I think one of the coolest ones, and I want to kind of tear this apart, $25,000 into Uber when it was worth around $5 million. So now I didn't crunch that math, but okay, 25,000 when it was around $5 million. What's the market? What's the market cap today? It's more than $5 million. I know that much.
I think the last funding was close to 70 billion. So it's appreciated in value slightly.
Yeah. Why don't you paint that story and perhaps give some vision to the audience where you were in your career as an angel investor at that moment in time? Had you had some grand slams at that moment in time? And this is the biggie for you, obviously.
What had happened was I was a journalist and an entrepreneur, and a friend of mine at a venture capital firm called Sequoia Capital said, hey, we would like to give you some money to go invest, essentially being an LP, a limited partner for me, and we'll split the returns 50-50. So go ahead and go invest. And so I invested in 20 companies, and maybe the second or third or fourth was Uber. And one of the other ones in the first 3 or 4 was a company called Thumbtack, which also became worth $1 billion, over $1 billion. And so it was quite a start to my angel investing career. So I had known Travis, the founder of Uber, from when he had Scour, which was his first company, and I covered it as a journalist, and we were friends when he was doing his second company. And so when I started angel investing, he had told me about Uber Taxi. It was called Uber Taxi at the beginning, and it had 1 or 2 cars on the road in San Francisco, and I invested it, and I introduced it to 25 different investors, and 3 of them said yes, and 20 of them said no. And those 20, every time they see me, they go, oh my God, I made such a mistake, like life-changing mistake, right? The rest is history. The company's obviously got a pretty huge footprint right now and is doing extremely well as a business.
So you said something there at the beginning of that narrative, which was you invested in 20. And I think this really opens up something about angel investing that I would love for you to elaborate on. In fact, I saw this great article. It's a couple years old from Chris Dixon, talking about the Babe Ruth effect in venture capital. It's not about home runs, it's about grand slams and a lot of strikeouts. You invest in 20. I mean, you did that for a reason, because you didn't know which one was going to necessarily be Uber.
Yeah, and when I was starting back then, it was kind of just like a fun pastime. It wasn't really like my day gig. I was building companies still as an entrepreneur, and this was just like a little side hustle. And then the side hustle turned into something obviously bigger, and I started investing on a regular basis and having a fund. And I think in my first 100 investments, we had 6 unicorns. So since I wrote the book, I added 3 more, which was interesting because we signed the book deal, I don't know, a year and a half ago or a year ago. And it was kind of neat to, as the book was coming out, have 3 more of them emerge, as it were. It's finding these companies, if you're here in Silicon Valley, finding companies to invest in that are high quality is not hard here in Silicon Valley. There's a large number of them, and they are raising probably 5, 6, or 7 rounds of funding in their early stages. So if you think about that, there's 5, 6, 7 times to get in as an angel in the early stages.
Keep me, though, at this idea for a second of portfolio diversification, the idea of casting this wide net, because I don't think for the average person, they probably think of it that way. They probably think, and I'm sure there's some superstars at the best VCs, they're going to have perhaps a keener eye. But still, even the guys that have been on Sand Hill Road for 40 years or whatever, they're still casting an extremely wide net because they don't have the ability to look into the future, and they don't have the ability to pick the winners necessarily. So you got to cast this wide net knowing you're going to have a lot of losers.
Yeah, it's the equivalent in poker would be, you lose 7, 8, 9 hands out of 10. and one or two hands you make a modest, profit on, and then, or you chop, and then one of them, returns 20 or 30x, which isn't possible in poker, obviously. But that's the unique nature of this enterprise, is that there's this massive implied odds. If you hit a winner, as the Grand Slams, as Chris Dixon was talking about, it really just changes everything, because no amount of singles and doubles can really add up to what the Grand Slam does. It would be as if a Grand Slam scored, instead of 4 runs in baseball, it scored 100. If literally hitting a Grand Slam scored you 100 points, the game would be decided by one Grand Slam, per game. People would just be bunting and trying to get on base and try and get the bases filled, and then just try to swing for the fences, and you'd automatically win the game, because nobody's going to score 2 Grand Slams in a game in all likelihood. So anyway, it's a weird metaphor, but the point is, you do need to have some level of diversification. You also have the ability to double or triple down on your winners where you can. So if you were to just take an approach, and I outline this in the book, of putting $5,000 into each of 20 companies, and that's $100,000, then you see 4 of them break out. So you give each of those 4 another $100,000. So you have $105,000 invested in 4 companies. And then you have 16 companies for the other $5,000, other $80,000. It basically means you put 84%, $420,000 of your $500,000 in total investment in the 4 best of 20, if that makes sense. So you're trying to really jam it in when you have great cards. Let's say the 5K goes up 50x and you make 250, but let's say that 100K also goes up just 5x. Well, that makes 500,000 in profit, right? So that's where you can start to see that when you have a winner, you don't need to have that huge multiple, but you have to put in larger amounts of money. And that's one of the things I've learned to do in my career that I wasn't doing originally.
In 2004, I put my first book out, in a trading book, and it was about a strategy. And the strategy is exactly what you're describing. So many hedge funds use that exact same strategy, futures markets, stock markets, et cetera.
If you find those winners, you're obviously, and you can cut the losers. The losers take a lot of time. That's why you see there's a certain wisdom to the older angel investors and older venture capitalists, where when there's a company that loses, they kind of smile and they're like, okay, we tried, and they wrap it up and they just spend less time on it, because they've learned, if the company is going to be a loss and it hasn't worked out, you might as well just move on, because it's an opportunity cost, right? It's taking up your time, even beyond the money you have in it. If it's never going to go 100x, and let's say you had $20,000 in it, and somebody offers to buy your shares for $10,000, you're like, well, this bet's never going to pay off, and I can take that $10,000 and place it on another bet that could take off. Maybe I should do that, right? I think that's the nature of the business, and people who know what they're doing in it.
By the way, you have gone through in this book step by step the entire process. It's not really where I want to go on this call, but for everyone should really take a look, because I have to say, even though I'm not an angel investor, you read your book and you walk away and you're kind of like, okay, you know what? This guy's giving me a lot of attitude, but it's a lot of good attitude. Now I'm jazzed up now. Really, you must have done this on purpose. You've really put a lot of attitude in this book. That I think it not in a kind of, as you mentioned, not like a bullshit self-help book, but you're really kind of laying it out there in black and white with a certain New York flair. It's motivating.
Yeah, the goal was, I knew that I could give people information that they needed to get started. In other words, I knew the curriculum, I knew the coursework, I knew I could give people that, right? They're going to come out of this with more information than they had going in. It'll be well worth the $10, $20, $30 they pay for the book or audio book. So I didn't have any fears about that. What I did have a concern about was, can I tell the story in a motivating way, in a fun way, in an entertaining way, so that people finish the book? That really was one of the things I was thinking about when I was writing it, is, does this build and make you excited and fascinate you and challenge you and get under your skin a bit about how the world is changing and how you might participate in that change? Because if you think about it, let's say you had a net worth of $2 million and you decided, you know what, I'm going to put 10% of my net worth, $200,000 into angel investing. And you do some of the things I talk about in the book, like placing small bets to start, and you invest $2,500 in, 20 companies and you put $50,000 to work, then you put 10K into 10 companies and you just kind of build this portfolio and then you double down on some winners, you lose half your money. So your net worth now, you lost half of the 200,000, 50% gone. Well, your net worth went from 2 million to 1.9 because this is only 10% of your net worth, and you'll probably be making whatever 7% of your off of your total net worth, right, in the market or whatever. So you're basically going to catch up immediately. Like in a year, less than a year, you'll make back that $100,000. No big deal. This kind of frees you to go, okay, if I do this, the worst case scenario is I lose, 5 or 10% of my net worth, which I can make back in a year or less, with my money in the stock market or real estate or whatever asset class, hopefully something that's blended. At the same time, you will be hanging out with the smartest people in the world, in the smartest market in the world, who want to change the world. They're pretty cool people to hang out with, and trying to change the world and building these companies is thrilling. It's almost like, even if you lost $100,000 and you're an affluent person, you would essentially get an MBA. Or a second MBA, or a better MBA. It's like an apprenticeship like none other, because you're hanging out with the people who have the massive skill and charisma and motivation to change the world. It's like being able to buy your way into Hollywood, right? Like there's people who back movies and they can hang out with the cool directors or, produce albums or something like that. But this is a way to do it where you're authentically a shareholder in these companies, as opposed to just, throwing money away in the movie business where nobody makes any money except for the talent.
Yeah, you talk about going from 2 million to 1.9 million. You're having to give that explanation to someone that perhaps is thinking, oh my gosh, I could possibly lose this money. But on the flip side of that explanation is the other side. The other side is, and you've got it as a subtitle in your work, no risk, no reward. I mean, if you don't risk it, there is not going to be a reward. And you make a nice case about this in the book too. We've got like trillions, stocks, bonds, real estate, and essentially, as you describe it, dead money. And so it's where else can you really still go? I mean, I tell my father sometimes, he's got real estate outside Washington, D.C. that he bought in the 70s. Okay, it's a gold mine now, but that type of, for most people, that type of huge real estate advance in the U.S., that doesn't exist now. What exists now is what you're describing.
Yeah, the way I say it in the book is no gamble, no future, which is what a bunch of old Chinese men used to say to me or to the deck of cards when we played poker in L.A. No gamble, no future before they threw their chips in, and you'd be probably, getting it in on a draw. It's an unmade hand, hoping for the best. It's interesting that people are so risk averse to me, because the downside risk, people just greatly over exaggerate, and the upside they actually don't appreciate. The upside.
Daniel Kahneman prospect theory, huh?
Yeah, I mean, if you just think about, like, if you were to invest $50K in a startup that went 1,000x, like, this really could change your future, and this does happen. It doesn't happen all the time, but even if it doesn't happen and you learn and you keep moving forward, this is I think virtuous and worth it. Now, the big mistakes in the warning I'll give people is you want to go very slow. And the reason I wrote this book is because I don't want to see people make mistakes. I want to see people succeed. And for them to succeed, they have to, number one, read the book, read it twice, take notes. You can go sell it after that again on eBay. But you really want to play small bets at the start, take your time, do your homework. And then as you start to learn and build a network, build some proprietary deal flow, you'll get better at it over time. There's no rush. Look at it as a 10-year journey. Look at it as a journey where you put 1 to 10% of your net worth into it. If you're super aggressive and you want to put 15 or 25% of your net worth in it, just be sure you're cool with losing some large portion of that. And if you are, then by all means, take some risk in your life. And what if you hit? One of the things that we do here in Silicon Valley is we make a big, long list of what could go wrong with a company. And then we make the short list of what could go right. And we try to focus on what could go right. What could work in this company's favor? In the case of YouTube, it was, my God, bandwidth and storage just got cheaper and cheaper. When it came to Instagram, cameras just got better and better. And the processors, the GPUs, the graphical processing units, and mobile phones just got better and better. So you have these trends. I think people greatly underestimate how big things can get. They overestimate how bad it will be to lose a little bit of money. People go to Vegas all the time and lose 10 grand and don't think about it. I look at, how people gamble. A lot of people just gamble in a circumstance where they're guaranteed with certainty to lose in the long term. I bet in a market that, I don't know if I can say this for sure, but
your expectation roughly.
Yeah, and I think the expectation is like for you to lose all your money as an angel investor in Silicon Valley, investing in companies in the Goldilocks zone, for you to lose your money doing that, you would have to be very unlucky, or I don't even know if you could try to do it if you were investing here in the Valley in companies in what we call the Goldilocks zone companies, which is not too hot, not too cold. They've got a product in market and they're revving on that product, and it's got some traction. They don't have the Series A yet. They don't have the venture capitalists putting 10 million in, but they're not like two people and an idea. People think angel investing is only writing a check to somebody with an idea. There's a whole series of fundraising that occurs between when the idea goes to market, gets its first couple of cohorts of users or customers. Users use a free product like Instagram. Customers use a paid product like Slack. You get a bunch of users or a bunch of customers going, you can actually start studying the data. And a company that gets their product to market and gets their first 10, 20, 30 paying customers, or their first 10, 20, 30,000 weekly or daily users, free users, they're going to have taken a lot of risk out for you. They're going to have taken out the risk that they can raise money, the risk that they can get to product to market, the risk they can build a product, the risk they can market the product to some small number of people, the ability to process payments and get the money in. Like, they're going to have figured out, half of what needs to be figured out, a third, maybe 2/3, whereas people with ideas, like, they figured out nothing, like not even 1 or 2%, because everybody has the same ideas. There's not really that many new ideas in the world. The population of people who have ideas is 100% of people with a pulse. Like, if you're conscious right now, I shouldn't say pulse. If you're conscious right now, you have ideas. In fact, some people who are unconscious or are sleeping, they also have ideas, because our brains constantly keep spewing out crazy stuff. I guess I can't curse on this, but our brains just spew out ish all the time, and they're spewing ish all the time. Like, your ideas mean nothing. You don't have great ideas. If you do have great ideas, congratulations. So does everybody else. Really, all that matters is execution. And so as an investor, you want to just focus on those people who execute, not the people who talk about executing.
I want to let you give some color, and I want to kind of give some of the nitty-gritty thinking that people are going to find in your book. One of the things that I really thought was just a nice line, which was, we were talking about key founder traits, that unrelenting desire to be, to see your vision realized, the unrelenting desire to see your vision realized. So few people in life have that. But as a good angel investor, you have to get good at spotting that. And I'm going to let you expand on that too. And if you've got any color, if you want to give an example, good or bad, that's great. But to add to that point, though, one of the things that you talk about, the negatives of some founders, for example, they won't work until they're funded. They won't do a sales call. They want balance in their life. Where do you get balance in your life if you're in your 20s or 30s and you're trying to build a multi-billion-dollar company? Balance is not a word that exists as far as I know.
Yeah. I think some people are under this delusion that, like, being a founder, they're going to be able to balance things. It's just not the case. It's just going to be hard. It's going to be a ton of hard work, and it doesn't get easier. I kind of see a lot of people who are tourists, and it's tourist season right now in Silicon Valley. Everybody wants to be a founder. Everybody wants to get in on it and try to make the next Airbnb or Uber or Dropbox, whatever it is. They're not going to do it. They're not going to get it done, and they have no idea how much work it is to do these things. And when they wake up one day and they realize, gosh, this is hard work, and chances are we're going to fail. I'm going to go, why did I ever leave my warm, toasty, warm house to go out on the open ocean and try to go to Antarctica or the Arctic or the New World? Like, they will realize they are not meant to be out at sea.
Do you have I'm curious if you want to give any color of, well, I'll let you go with this one. Your biggest miss. Tell the story of your biggest miss and how that happened.
Yeah, so Twitter would be the biggest, I think. It's probably a $50 million mistake. So I was out at brunch with Evan Williams and Biz Stone, and they were showing me Twitter, and I was super excited to hear about it. And then I used it, and they signed me up, and was an SMS service back then, and they were sharing breakfast, and they were like, okay, look, Biz is going to say what he's having for breakfast. You say what you're having. I say what I'm having. We all see what each other's having for breakfast. And I was like, oh my God, you guys just cost me like 8 cents in SMS messages. And he was like, no, it's going to be an app, and it's going to, Apple's got this new app store coming out. It's going to be an app. It's going to be on the web. You won't have to pay for fees. I was like, yeah, whatever. Like, listen, let me tell you something. This is going to be a disaster. It's going to be a cacophony of idiots just spewing 140 character dopey fragments of sentences. It's not going to even make any grammatical sense because you're limiting it to the limit of an SMS message, which is stupid. It's going to draw the most inane, stupid people who don't want to fill out their arguments and write a 300-word blog post. The reason why blogs have been successful is because people have a little bit of room to fill out their thoughts. And if you do not have the ability to write 2 or 3 coherent paragraphs, why on earth should I pay attention to you if you can't even write well? I mean, this is for bad writers. I was just like a sort of a writer snob, and I was like, listen, Biz, Ev, like this is going to be a cacophony of idiots. I'm out. I would never participate in something as stupid as Twitter. And like, you know what? It is a cacophony of idiots at a time. It's a beautiful cacophony at times. And, there's brilliant people who've mastered the 140 characters, and there's revolutions occurring on it and breaking news. It's, there's nothing better. And being able to interact with influential people is incredible, that anybody can comment on anybody's stuff. I mean, it's just bizarre how amazing it is. And it's at scale now. So I do think it's fascinating in that way.
Were they pitching you on the way out the door? I mean,
I was just friends with them, and I was right before I started having the ability to actually invest and was actually thinking of doing this. So it's kind of funny. I was like, actually, part of the reason I really embraced angel investing 6 or 7 years ago was because of that experience of like, I know people who are smart. I am hanging out with smart people. I should give smart people money because they will bring back much more than you give them. And so I have to go give my friends money, get little tiny slivers of whatever they're working on because they need capital, and this would be a great way for me to support them. And lo and behold, here we are 6 or 7 years later, and I've hit more unicorns than almost anybody has ever in history. If you can't tell, I'm having the time of my life.
Hey, one last thing I want to leave people with. I think it's a great piece of wisdom. And you talk about look, hey, life is random. The companies that we're talking about in Silicon Valley, random, but luck isn't. And you point out that look, it comes down to your network. Do you have the right people around you? And then working hard. I'm sure some people could say, that's cliche, but it's not. I mean, you physically, as we said at the beginning of this conversation, if you want to be in the startup world, in the angel world, in the VC world, you've got to physically go to where the people are. So, I mean, because there's a lot of people think, hey, I can just email somebody, I can, post on Twitter or whatever. No, you've got to go there and get in physical presence.
I think you kind of have to be here. And if you think about all the lucky people I know have figured out a way to network their way into the places where money's being made. And it sounds like it's impossible, but in the book, I kind of give the hacks that I used. And one of the hacks, that I used early days was I used to just get, I actually didn't think I put this one in the book, but I'll tell it here. When I was broke, I would just I would go to a conference. I knew some people at the time from being a journalist, and I would just get a table for 8 people at a Mexican restaurant or a barbecue place, somewhere where I could order family style, which is really cheap if you order family style because people just eat appetizers and talk, and then they never want entrees because then you say, does anybody want any more food? And everybody goes, nope. And you just ordered 20, 15 appetizers for 8 people and you're done. But anyway, putting that aside, I would then find 1 or 2 people to come to dinner with me who are friends of mine. Then I would figure out, okay, who's the next level up from these 3 people, me and my 2 friends. Okay, let me try to invite those people. And then when I got another yes, I would take those 4 names and say, oh, we're 4 of us are having dinner. Do you want us to get an extra seat for you? Meanwhile, I have a table of 8. They say, sure, I'd love to come. Can I bring my friend? I was like, oh, let me see if I can get another 2 seats. Hold on a second. Okay, yeah, no, I got the 2 seats. Okay, great. Boom, we're 6. And then one of those people would say oh, can I bring a friend? I don't know. Let me check. All of a sudden I got dinner of 8 going. Half of the people I don't know, half of them I do know. And you do that enough times, all of a sudden you got a network. So in the angel scenario, if you invest in 10 or 20 companies, Each of those companies probably has 20 investors. So you either know 200 or 400 other investors who you can email and say, we are both investors in Uber, Airbnb, Thumbtack, Desktop Metal, whatever it is, together, calm.com. Would you like to get coffee? I'm a co-investor with so many people. Like, I'm a co-investor with 1,000 people. Like, I couldn't possibly meet them all in this lifetime. It's kind of crazy when you think about it.
Again, it's the leverage of technology. It's the leverage of the space that you're in. And there's a lot of other spaces in this world that have that kind of network leverage too. It's great stuff. Hey, the book, Angel, How to Invest in Technology Startups, Timeless Advice from an angel investor who turned $100,000 into $100 million. That's one of those titles that causes people to pause and say, man, I better check this one out.
Yeah, hopefully. That's the idea. And I read the audiobook. So if you're into audiobooks, if you go to Audible, I read the audiobook. And if you're interested in co-investing with me, I syndicate the deals I'm doing. Like maybe 40% of them choose to syndicate. The founders say, yeah, I'll let some other investors in. So if you go to Jason's Syndicate with 2 S's, jasonssyndicate.com, you will if you're an accredited investor or non-accredited investor, you can join. We're currently doing deals for accredited investors. We'll be doing some non-accredited ones later in the year, probably. But anyway, you can invest in the companies I'm investing in, which is kind of fun.
I think also there's another website, which is your lastname.com, yes?
Calacanis.com, yep. And then you can always find me on Twitter. I'm Jason, twitter.com/Jason. I didn't invest in the company. I did get Jason.
Jason, thank you for taking some time today. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. My pleasure.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.